is an attempt to kill Brett Kavanaugh that was recently foiled in Maryland. Really a case that shows how pointless a lot of the proposed gun control legislation is. And we're going to talk a little bit about how a lot of the profile of the person involved shows that there is a real problem with domestic terrorism on the left. It's not necessarily organized, but it nevertheless is something that the media typically ignores. So before we get into it, I do want to remind you that all of my different social media and video hosting links are in the link tree below. So check it out if you're on Getter, if you're on Truth, if you're on Gab, Minds, what about Odyssey, Rumble, and BitChute. All of those are in the link tree, as well as my Substack newsletter, which isn't very frequent, but still it's something that you might as well take a look at, because I'm not going to spam you. Anyway, we're going to get into the topic right now. So a guy named Nicholas John Roske, or Roski, I think is the way you pronounce it, from California, was arrested last night in Montgomery County, Maryland, near the home of Supreme Court Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And this is one of the cases that I would say the media is going to try to forget very quickly. Now, when I say the media, I sort of want to include also people like, even Fox News, because unfortunately we've had cases in the past where you have criminals who have a left-wing tendency, criminal terrorists, and they sort of get forgotten. Okay, there was, for example, last year, the man who I think should be called the Capitol, the Capitol Barger, I think you could call him. He was, I don't even remember his name, which to tell you something, I believe he had a Muslim last name. He was a follower of the Nation of Islam. He apparently had some sort of schizophrenic problems, and he actually murdered a Capitol police officer only a few months after the Capitol riot. And the media barely covered it, partially because of both his race and religion, and the fact that it would probably, take a little bit of steal a little bit of the thunder from January 6th, which is what they always want to talk about. They always want to talk about January 6th, which was, what they call an insurrection. If it was, it would be possibly the most poorly planned and coordinated insurrection in the history of America, because you had all of these people who were unarmed rushing into the Capitol and leaving mostly without any incident. In many cases, simply leaving because the president told them to. And in fact, how could the insurrection succeed if simply occupying Congress does not mean that you've overthrown the government? So there's really no premise under it. Also, none of the members of Congress were actually harmed. There were a number of Capitol police officers that in the aftermath died. I think one of them, Brian Sicknick, it was alleged that it was because of a beating that he took with a fire extinguisher. That later proved to be untrue. It was something that was a media concoction or simply leaked nonsense by the Capitol Police themselves. So those of you that are paying attention might note that you've heard a lot about the people who have been charged because of January 6th, because the media is bringing it up again. They're also, regurgitating the names of people like Enrique Tarrio, and also they've led to the arrest. They've actually caused the arrest of Peter Navarro, the former advisor to Donald Trump, mostly on economic affairs. And they want to talk about January 6th because at the moment there's very little good news going on. The economy is in a major slump. The war in Ukraine is not going well. Race relations are bad, and there are general shortages and a real economic malaise. So what the Biden administration and the Democratic Congress need is a sideshow, and that's exactly what January 6th is. Tomorrow night is Thursday. I think that this podcast will be published before that. The Democrats plan to have some sort of public hearing regarding the January 6th proceedings and what they feel is going to be compelling evidence that there was this grand plot to overthrow the republic. And, that's something that they want to focus on. Now, what happened last night actually puts a severe damper on that effort, because this guy, Nicholas John Roski, whatever the reason that he came to the Capitol, from the article that I read from the New York Post, it seemed like he was distraught over the upcoming decision that may overturn Roe v. Wade, probably will overturn Roe v. Wade, according to most assessments, and also the massacres in Uvalde and in Buffalo. So he purchased a handgun, a Glock, I think it was a Glock 19, it said in the article, and several magazines. He brought zip ties, which is also something they used to. Now, if you read some of the stupid coverage of the Capitol riot, zip ties in and of themselves were considered a very dangerous weapon by the January 6th committee. They kept talking about the zip ties and everything. So he had zip ties, he had a hammer, and I think it said he had rope or something. And it sounded like he was either going to kill or take hostage somebody, and it was going to be Brett Kavanaugh. And then when he arrived at the justice's home from taking an Uber, U.S. Marshals that are posted in the vicinity of the justice's house saw Roski, and he sort of squirmed and ran away. And it doesn't say that they gave pursuit, by the way. And later he turned himself in because he said he was having suicidal thoughts. And it sounds like he was one of these very unfortunate characters. And I don't know if you've ever met these people, but he said that, according to the article at least, he said that he wanted to do this in order to give some sort of purpose to his life because of his anxiety and the recent events regarding all of the stuff with Uvalde and the shootings and gun control and abortion. So clearly this wasn't a person with the most sophisticated reading of how to actually accomplish something, because if he would have attempted to break into Kavanaugh's house, he probably would have died. He's actually lucky to be alive, because I think a couple weeks ago, the U.S. Marshal Service actually heightened security around the homes of justices, and specifically the justices that are likely to be the majority in the decision. So when we're talking about this, it's important to note that there were many threats against Brett Kavanaugh that were a result of his confirmation hearings. And if you remember those hearings, Brett Kavanaugh was actually the target of some of the most unfair coverage from the media and from, obviously the Democratic senators who were questioning him that I've ever witnessed. And this is coming, by the way, from someone who's not a fan of Brett Kavanaugh. I didn't think, when I heard that he was being nominated, I didn't really know much about him. And then when I heard that he'd been an architect of the Patriot Act, certainly he was a poor choice in my mind of the people that Donald Trump had to pick from. So, look, this isn't about having a justice that is, tailor-made to everything that I want to be done for the legal system in America. I don't think, yes, there are justices that are good, and there are justices that I probably would never agree with, and Kavanaugh probably falls in the middle somewhere. But it's another thing to threaten the life of a Supreme Court justice and actually come close to, executing a plot, and that's exactly what happened. I'm not aware of how common it is for Supreme Court justices to be threatened with death I'm also not aware how many people who make a threat actually do something to actualize it. So those are, I think, open questions. I think I'll try to reach out to somebody I know who may have a little bit of insight into this. But this is a really serious issue, and some people are actually, reminding the media now that about 2 years ago, when he was protesting near the Supreme Court, Senate Majority Leader, at the time he was Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, was actively threatening Brett Kavanaugh. He was saying, I'm telling you, Gorsuch, I'm telling you, Kavanaugh, you will reap the whirlwind. Those were his words. And, some would say, yes, that's just rhetoric. It's just grandstanding. It's just a bunch of him feeding red meat to the crowd of idiots who come to the Supreme Court thinking that protesting the Supreme Court is really going to affect the decision. In reality, we don't know what affects their... I think what really affects their decisions more is their conversations with each other more than what anyone else is saying outside. Do you really think they creep out to the window and they're like, I don't know whether, this maritime law is really valid. Let me see what the street says. No, and I don't think it goes for controversial decisions either, by the way. I think a lot of them are really set in their opinions, whether they're good or bad. So the protesters of the Supreme Court, I think, have to be some of the least useful people in the country, because they don't understand how the judicial system works. At least, when you have a justice who is guarded by round-the-clock security, is cloistered among the elite of the legal system, doesn't really interact with normal people day to day as much as you or I would, at least unless they go golfing, and they're probably not hobnobbing with some of the lower classes of society. And I'm saying that I am basically saying that the Supreme Court is full of elitist snobs. So what do you expect them to do? So this is actually something where it's a good question what Schumer was trying to say. What was he trying to say by "you will reap the whirlwind"? It's either he has to come clean and say, I was just talking out of emotion and trying to give these people encouragement that we're going to defend their abortion rights, or he has to say what he was meaning, which is maybe he did mean that they were going to do something to Kavanaugh or to Gorsuch, who was another Trump appointment at the time. Later, they were joined by Amy Coney Barrett. So Trump has 3 people he appointed to the court, and there's also 3 other justices that were appointed earlier by both Presidents Bush. So those are the 6 justices that are appointed by Republican presidents, with Chief Justice Roberts being the swing vote. Anyway, so getting back to the issue at hand, the attempt to murder Justice Kavanaugh has to go down as somebody basically going in and buying into the rhetoric, buying into how awful Brett Kavanaugh was, according to the media. Remember that people were calling him a rapist. People were calling him a sexual predator, a frat boy. They were basically characterizing him as some sort of booze-addicted sex addict. And those were statements that were made over and over again and played on a loop in the media, whether it was on CNN or MSNBC or some of the YouTube channels. So I have very little sympathy for the people who incited against Justice Kavanaugh, even if I don't really see him as a great person to be on the Supreme Court at the time. Now, he is on the court as it so happens, and I wouldn't be okay with any attempt on the life of any of the justices. It doesn't matter. I mean, Sotomayor, who I probably don't agree with on anything. On the other hand, you had Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think that many Republicans were critical to a point where they were trying to say, well, she doesn't even deserve to be on the court. Well, she was duly nominated and confirmed to the court, and she's often been cited as having pretty honest opinions, even if they're ones that you disagree with, including one where she actually said that she does not really believe that Roe v. Wade was a proper decision, but she does think that abortion should be the right of a woman, right? She was a staunchly pro-choice justice, but she had criticisms of the Roe v. Wade decision because it was a very convoluted way of giving that right. Anyway, so what we're seeing is that this person, Mr. Roski, Nicholas John Roski, he apparently had a number of psychological issues, may have been taking medications, and he bought a handgun. So this whole notion that it's all about assault weapons and it's all about mental health. Now, is it not about mental health? Because apparently this guy did have mental health issues. People often forget that there was another attempt on the life, not of a Supreme Court justice, but a number of Republican members of Congress back in, I think it was 2017. And that included Steve Scalise and a number of other members of the Republican baseball team. Remember, there's a congressional baseball team, I think, a baseball game every year between the Democrats and the Republicans. So Steve Scalise was there. I know Rand Paul was there. I know there were a few other, I think Tom Massey also might have been there. So these guys were almost murdered by a guy with a sniper rifle. So neither of those are actually the classical definition of an assault rifle. Not the one that, I don't remember which one the guy at the congressional baseball game was carrying. His name was James Hodgkinson. And I also don't remember, I do know that Nicholas John Roski was carrying a Glock 19 handgun or 17 handgun. I don't know which one it was. But in any case, both of them were far left radicals who were very spiteful and set off by recent events. And Glenn Greenwald has actually issued an open question, and he said it should be researched whether Joy Reid radicalized the shooter, because she's often made very inflammatory remarks about Justice Kavanaugh, and why was he saying this? Because he's basically being very coy. He's saying that the same treatment should be applied to these commentators after they've been applying it to Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson was in many of the recent cases blamed for inciting the killer, especially the killer in Buffalo. And there's no evidence that the killer in Buffalo actually had any interest in Tucker Carlson. In fact, he often made very disparaging remarks about Fox News and about the conservatives and all of that. And he was apparently way too radical to be in the Trump movement. Nevertheless, he's lumped in with them. That's a very interesting treatment, that even somebody who despises Tucker Carlson and Fox News is lumped in with them. This killer in Buffalo, who's still alive, by the way, because he was captured by police, he also tried to claim that Fox News is controlled by Jewish interests and things like that. So it's got to be one or the other, okay? It doesn't matter what your opinion is of Fox News, but you can't claim that this guy was a Fox News zombie if he hated the network and alleged that it was controlled by Jews who he hates. So similarly, so Glenn Greenwald's point, after I made that short tangent, was that you have to explore, given all of the vitriol about Brett Kavanaugh spread by Joy Reid over the years, whether she incited the shooting. Because isn't this how it works? If you're going to investigate people who have no connection to Tucker Carlson but have some sort of crime based on prejudice, you're going to investigate Tucker Carlson for it. That's their logic. Shouldn't the same apply to Joy Reid? And obviously, it's a tongue-in-cheek comment because it's not really going to be applied with reciprocity. The people like Joy Reid that have made their hay on racializing everything and making it all about how white people have to atone for the big wounds that we're seeing in America over slavery and racism and Jim Crow. And they happen to also be making 6 or 7 figure salaries at MSNBC. And often, those salaries are paid for by advertising from companies with very shady ethics, like the pharmaceutical companies and polluters and things like that, arms contractors. So, Joy Reid, I think Glenn Greenwald makes an excellent point. And this is really, it strikes at the heart of why some people are saying that we're close to a civil war. Unfortunately, this is the type of discourse that we have left in America. It is blaming someone else for acts of violence that have nothing to do with them. And that's what's been happening with Kavanaugh. That's something I appreciate Glenn Greenwald for saying. Just as an example, I think Glenn Greenwald is someone who is very far apart from my sympathies politically. He happens to be a supporter of very, very far left Latin American regimes, like the one in Venezuela and other ones in Nicaragua and in Cuba. I happen to be opponents of those governments and also supporter of the Bolsonaro government in Brazil, which he is an opponent of. He also happens to be a very strident and bitter critic of Israel. And I am, an Israel supporter, maybe not the most vocal Israel supporter, but still. But Glenn Greenwald's points are excellent, which really the way that I think he states them is that, you have to establish a civil dialogue and civil conversation before you go and point out that somebody else is inciting hatred. And these people are not doing it. Their behavior actually emulates the very thing that they're accusing Tucker Carlson of, more than his behavior does. It's what a lot of people call deflection by projection. So I think that this is a very interesting case. I think that what's going to happen with Nicholas John Roski, there might be attempts to get him acquitted based on the insanity defense and things like that. And in the end, we are going to see more of these incidents the further we are approaching the election. Remember that some of the people who were the most violent in the past few years, with the BLM riots, they've never been charged. They never will be charged because the justice system is biased in their favor. There were 2 people who were charged for throwing Molotov cocktails in Brooklyn. I think they were in Park Slope. And there were 2 lawyers, and they were convicted. And the sentencing was for like a year of I think it was like a year of probation or something. And on the other hand, you have people who were January 6th rioters who went to the Capitol and they walked around and maybe they took something or they snapped some photos or they had some choice words with a police officer or they maybe jostled with a police officer. And some of those people have been detained without trial for months and months, and they've been denied their basic civil rights. They haven't necessarily been afforded the counsel of an attorney consistently or even at all. And that is the unequal justice system that we have in the country based on ideology. One could argue that left-wing terrorists have better, they have better legal conditions than even common criminals, right? Some common criminals are actually denied basic legal representation or they get inadequate representation by public defenders. Apparently this Nicholas John Roski, whatever his name is, he's currently represented by a public defender. We'll see what happens. I think it's important to remind people that, and this came up with in a conversation with somebody this week, somebody I was arguing with, that often history is changed by very unlikely people. And one of the ways that this is done is through litigation. People should remember that Norma McCorvey, the woman who was Roe in Roe v. Wade, was a woman who was pregnant, and she ended up, I guess the Planned Parenthood and other activists who wanted to legalize abortion nationwide, they had her be the nominal plaintiff, or the plaintiff that was the title plaintiff in the case. Apparently, she did not end up having the abortion, from what I remember. Okay, she's now deceased. But another case, okay, that people forget is Miranda. Who was Miranda? The person that was named after, we think of the Miranda rights in the U.S. If you're from overseas, maybe you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. When you get arrested, this is often in cop shows, they have to read you your Miranda rights, and they address your rights to an attorney and your right to remain silent and all of your other 5th, 6th, and I think 8th Amendment rights as a criminal suspect. So the guy, I think his name was Ernesto Miranda, he was a rapist from Arizona, and he was actually arrested over there. And he was basically charged without being afforded those rights by the police, and he was interrogated without being told that he had the right to an attorney. And it was challenged, and that's how we have Miranda rights. Now, in the end, the conviction was, I forget the term, but it was like remanded back to the courts, and they had to hold a new trial. And so a person who is a guilty rapist is actually responsible for one of the most important rights that we as Americans have when going through a criminal trial, okay? And it is important. It is important that criminals are given due process, because otherwise we don't know whether justice is blind or whether it's biased. That's about it. Thank you for listening. Also, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment below. Your comments are always appreciated, and I do read them because there's not that many of them. Also, please check out the link tree. You can find my other social media. You can find my other video hosting platforms over there. So whether it's Getter, whether it is Truth Social, Subscribestar, you got Gab, you got Minds, and you got Odyssey, Rumble, and BitChute. And have a great day. Bye-bye.